Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and following the 3H's of the channel. And in this video, I have a whole bunch of encounters that are just plain crazy. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. So this isn't my story, it happened to my dad. My dad was an Air Force officer during the war with Ecuador in northern Peru. My dad was lost in the jungle. His campsite had been raided at night by enemy soldiers. There was one dead and several left behind injured. My dad and 5 other officers managed to escape. They get going to the nearest checkpoint to ask for extraction. It's the middle of the Peruvian Amazon. There's nobody in at least 100 miles in any direction. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, lights appear in the sky. There's a UFO hovering around in the jungle. The UFO descends into a gap. My dad and the officers hide in the bushes, and then they see 3 humanoids in what looks to be thick suits of some kind come out of this UFO and start to what it appears to be taking ground samples and just burning stuff. This all lasts at least an hour. The humanoids return to the ship, and as fast as they showed up, they're gone. They shoot off into the sky, never to be seen again. Now I know my dad as a straight shooter. He's not usually the type to BS around or tell fantastical stories. So when he told me that story, I could see that he was definitely still shocked or afraid of whatever it is they saw that day. So I don't know if I would call this paranormal or just plain weird. I was around 13 or 14 years old. I was out in the woods, grilling. My brother was there, and my father was there, and a couple of his friends who were already drunk. I believe we were about 600 to 700 meters into the woods. This was from the town's major road, and I believe that we were near a river too. So we're grilling sausages and stuff. It's a beautiful early evening in the summer, so it's not that dark. Now, one of the guys who was drunk is a policeman, and he has his dog with him. The dog starts barking like mad at the trees. And now this is a pine forest, so there's not a whole lot of vegetation, and we had a clear sight for at least 100 meters. But this thing was much closer. It really snuck up on us. The dog is going crazy. I turned and looked in the direction that the dog was barking at, and I see a really large cat. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, you saw a panther. No, it was the size of a horse, but it had the proportions and the look of a common house cat. It stared at us curiously, especially at the dog, and then it turned its head and scampered away as if a kitten would that's playing a game. I don't think the drunk guys even ever saw it. They were busy guzzling down beer and whatnot, and they didn't really care about the dog. The dog wanted to chase this thing so bad that it was straining on the leash. Later on, we had ice cream. I've been in those woods after this incident countless times. I practically grew up in those woods, and I've searched for whatever this big cat thing was. I've never seen it again there, or before. So yeah, not really scary, just really weird. Seeing essentially a tabby cat the size of a horse, and then it just scampers off, never to be seen again. When I was in Iraq, I learned that many Arabs believe in black magic, and that's not to say that we hadn't seen some weird stuff there either. We definitely saw our fair share from time to time, but only one time really stands out. It was the middle of January, and it felt super cold. It was only about 45 degrees, but when it's 90 all day long, that feels frigid. So we had been tasking to escort this weird camera truck out to a smaller FOB that was pretty much in the middle of nowhere. When we finally got to the new FOB with the truck that next night, we were hanging out with the intel guys, trying to see what their crazy super spy truck could do. We ended up screwing around with the thermal imaging on it, checking out farmers at 2 a.m. from kilometers away and whatnot. And then we saw something, or we thought we did, a heat signature that fit a general human body, but something was off. When you look at a person through thermals, they're kind of a blob. If they have their arms at their side, you often can't even differentiate them from the body. But this thing was different. Its heat signature was all weird. It had too long arms. The legs seemed crippled and kind of bent backwards and incapable of the flexation it takes to move. I still remember the way it shambled along, these weird, jerking movements. Whatever it was, we lost it past a field and into a canal the tiny village nearby used for their waste. Now I love spooky stuff. I wanted so bad to mount up and follow that thing, but when you have an intel lieutenant present, no fun shall be had. Also, the canal where it shambled to was full of garbage and wastewater. I still have no idea what we saw, but it's just among the weird things you see in the desert. So bear with me, as this story is a lot. I used to work at a Christian camp years ago, somewhere in the hills of North Georgia, the country. It's no longer a camp, and sadly it's completely gone. I was a counselor or teacher there for the science department. I had a real simple job out of high school, and it paid fairly well. I just essentially had to teach from a book that they gave me. Simple acid bases, nature things like photosynthesis and leaves and all that stuff. It was a pretty fun job. So by the time this happened, it was just another day that was over. I was getting ready for the long drive back home. The science classroom was essentially a small shack that fit maybe 12 people at max capacity. Normally, I just taught outside because I had more than that. By this point, the kids were gone and the sun was setting. Another counselor barges in as I'm just about to be done cleaning up. He says, "Hey, come help. There's a rabid dog on the edge of campus." I tell them, "I don't want anything to do with that. Call animal control." The guy laughs at me and reminds me where we are, and says that we have to put it down immediately because it's a danger to campers, and even says, "Chop chop." So my intention isn't to kill it, it's just to scare it away. So I grab a push broom and I follow him out. And I'm met outside by the medical lady. She's in her late 30s. Her name is Sarah. Another counselor, he was in his late 30s as well, Ted, and the supervisor, not of my department, but a general supervisor. He was in his 60s. His name is Frank. Frank has some kind of really old-looking gun, and Ted has this log-looking thing. Sarah has nothing, which makes me think, why did they want Sarah out here then? So we make our way to the edge of the camp, where it was last sighted. As soon as I catch a glimpse of it, I'm like, what the hell? That is not a dog. It runs right up to us from the tree line, through some really tall grass. This thing is about the size of a small bear, and has bright yellow eyes. I've never seen anything like it before. It's about 5 or so feet from me, staring at me, and then there seems to be what at first looked like foam coming out of its mouth, but it isn't. It's pouring sand from its mouth, and this thing is covered in sores that look matted with sap and twigs and pustules. It doesn't look aggressive, but it doesn't look scared either. It seems curious or nervous, hurt maybe. Regardless, this thing weighs way more than I do, so I spread my arms to try and look menacing to it. Frank has the gun aimed at it. Ted is just terrified in the corner. The thing starts backpedaling, actively vomiting sand everywhere. And then I realize something. The sores that are covering its body are moving like they're alive. And I also noticed that what I thought was foam and then sand is actually some kind of finely ground sawdust. We've been face to face with this thing for a few minutes, but it feels like hours. All of us are just absolutely shocked and horrified at what we're seeing. I yell at Frank to shoot it. I have the worst feeling in the pit of my stomach. Frank took the shot, but Frank missed. My first thought was, great job, Frank, now we're all dead. Right after the shot, this thing's reaction was not what I thought would happen. And if you thought what I said was weird up until now, this is the part that makes me sound absolutely insane. After the shot, this thing goes up onto a side hill and starts turning into a stump. The sores and stuff erupt all around its head and consume the body. It's about twice the size now, and it's still moving up the side hill. The sand or sawdust or whatever it was coming from its giant crack of a maw is all woody and stuff now. Sarah is just praying. Frank is fervently digging in his pockets for another shell. Ted is ghost mode, scared stiff. I am literally just watching the show at this point. There's nothing else I can do. And it gets even more insane. Once the thing backs up into the hill enough, it starts warping and shit again, rooting itself into the hillside. Its face is completely gone. There's that sawdust stuff from every crack. And then there's now a dead tree on the side of this hill. Everything is quiet, like the tree has always been there. The wood shavings, or dust, or whatever they are on the ground, all around it. We look at each other, all of us trying to understand and comprehend what the hell that we just saw. Sarah cries all the way back to camp. Frank told me that if I spoke about it, I'd lose my job. Being that young, I listened, but I still told the story every once in a while at parties and stuff, just for the ridicule or the laughter, but I never could figure out just what it was. I never heard a story like it. I've never heard of anything like it, ever, from anywhere. Before I quit that job, I checked on the tree one last time. It never moved. It's still there, just as if it's always been there. I don't usually tell this story or really get a chance to, but here we go. I live in a town not far from the Canadian border, and around this time I would say that I was not quite a teenager, but not quite a kid. One summer, I decided that I was going to be a ninja. I had black water shoes, camo pants, and a top. My face and head were covered in another camo shirt that I had wrapped around myself. I thought I was super cool. Anyways, my clothes are muddy as the day is long, too. I leave them outside in a trash bag in my fort, with dirt and leaves in the bag. This is a trick that I learned from my dad, who hunts, and he makes it so that your clothes don't smell like laundry soap or deodorant. If you only take hot water, no soap, showers the night before you hunt, and then rock these camo clothes, you're basically invisible to animals, as long as you're quiet, and I am quiet. Remember, I'm a ninja. I am the night. So you can picture me running around with my blowgun and, quote, hunting birds and bugs and other stuff. One day in the woods behind my house, like every other day, I decided to suit up at my fort and change into my ninja gear and bounce around playing pretend. I run around Scooby-Doo for an hour or so as a ninja, mainly down this old road near my house that's toward a creek. I know the area quite well, and I really like the creek too. Now, At the time of this, I was 3 miles or so, and the creek was maybe another mile or so from where I was. But I suddenly realized that I'm looking at something big, brown, and kind of furry in front of me. I register it, but I don't even flinch as I was kind of stunned around this time too. It's sitting facing away from me on the old road. It's doing something. I just keep walking, running or bouncing toward it. As I get closer, I realize that this thing must be 6 feet tall, sitting down. I slowly realize that I should stop running toward it, about 30 feet from it. As I told you, I was pretty stunned at the time of this story. I realize that it's dangerous as it turns to face me, looking over its shoulder at me. Its body was broad as all get out, like 3 or 4 feet across. It was medium dark brown, and its face was absolutely obscured by fur. Its eyes were dark, black, but beady, no whites to them. It just looked at me over its shoulder while turning, and we made eye contact. In that second, I took off running the way I came, like a madman. I was running at full tilt, like my very life depended on it. I seriously nearly black out, trying not to break the sprint. I honestly felt like this may be it, and I remember trying to make real decisions for the first time in my life. Should I stay on the road? Should I cut through the trees or the bushes? Should I climb a tree? I decided to run full throttle down the road, risking the blackout. I make it home alive and lock all the doors. Suddenly, I'm feeling vulnerable in my stupid house with like sliding glass doors and stuff. But there's no sign that it followed me. I am a ninja. I barely recover my breath, and I have to lay down for some time just to not die. I seriously ran my lungs off. That night, there are sounds outside, and I am under the covers like a 10-year-old. Dad says it was probably a bear the next morning, and tells me not to go far from the house for a few days until it leaves. The next day, I don't even go outside. When Dad leaves for work, I close all the windows and shades. That day, I see a figure through the dining room shades that looks big as hell, like a sitting bear. I sneak my ass into the laundry room, silent, and try not to cry. That night, more noises outside, and this time I hear Dad get out of bed. He grabs a shotgun and flicks the lights on off the back porch and yells, "Hey bear, go away," and something like that, over and over. He's done this before. The bears typically leave. The next day, I repeat the same ritual. All the windows are closed and the shades are drawn. I watch TV and play video games. This thing is not going to eat me. I see figures in the windows again, and I think that it's time to employ my dad as a watchful protector when he gets home. When Dad gets home, I spill the beans entirely. I tell Dad that I pissed off a monster and I led it home. Dad is not fazed, but mad at me. Dad decides to take out all the trash and move the cans away from the house. He mows the lawn too, way out so we can see it coming. Then he turns the automatic lights on that came with our house. We turned them off when we moved in, since they would always go on and it would always wake us up. 99% of the time it was a stray dog. 1% of the time it was nothing, maybe a raccoon. Dad then calls animal control and tells them that a bear has been screwing around our property, and if he has to shoot it, he will. They get mad. He tells them to come get it. They say that they can't. Dad says that ought to do it, like he solved the problem. I trusted him. That night, the lights go on, and we hear the noises. Dad opens the back door and yells, "Hey bear, go away bear," or something like that, again and again, but there's nothing in sight. I now have the courage, since my dad is there, So I look out my windows. I see nothing. The lights go off. After a while, the lights go on again. Dad does the same thing. Nothing to see though. This repeats all night until Dad says, "Screw it, it's just a bear, it'll leave eventually." But I can't sleep at all. I'm staring out the windows with the shades barely pulled aside all night. And then I see something big coming from the trees far out. It moves quickly and very unnaturally, like it doesn't have to build up speed to move or stop. It just moves rapidly and reverses course rapidly as well. It was shaped like a Buick with long, spidery legs. I watched this thing move around the yard way off for like an hour, not saying anything. Eventually, it leaves. The next day, I spot massive imprints in the yard through the window and I go up to check it out. It's like something big was standing and looking in all of our windows on 2 feet. There was no mud, so no footprints. My window, though, has several deep indents in front of it. I stayed inside for the rest of the summer. The summer of the ninja has been cancelled. It came back a few times in the next week, but then it left for good. True story. So, what did you think of those? They were pretty crazy, weren't they? If you have one of your own, I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to. I also have a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to donate to the channel that way. And of course, super thanks here on YouTube. And with that, I hope you have a good week, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump. Thank you for liking and subscribing and all that good stuff. And I'll catch you later.